Welcome everybody to today's online seminar. My name is Stephen Frost and I'm moderator for the Asian Dialogues on Sustainability in the Textile and Garment Industry. Today's part of the online seminar series, a technical seminar, a deeper dive. This is our fifth deeper dive where we go into technical issues much more deeply than our general online seminar series. And it's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of GIZ Fabric Asia. Today's topic is guidance on addressing violence and harassment, a very important topic that often finds its way into media stories. I cover this every day of the week, and I see this topic coming up regularly, no matter what production country. I'm going to hand things over in a moment, but firstly, just let me run through some housekeeping things. First of all, this will be recorded as usual. Secondly, you're all on mute. That's not because we don't want to hear from you. We do want to hear from you, and you can put questions into the chat box as usual. But in this session, the people running this that will be introduced to you in a moment do have some other tools available for you to be able to comment and participate in this session. It's a very dynamic session, this one. And thirdly, we will, as usual, have a survey poll towards the end. There'll be a link posted in the chat box. If you just take a 30 seconds or 60 seconds to answer that, it's really helpful for us. It provides feedback for us to make these sessions better, more relevant and applicable to you, the listener or the participant. So it's my great pleasure then to introduce Jenny Hickey. Jenny is the Deputy Program Manager for Better Factories Cambodia. She's worked in Bangladesh and Thailand as well as Cambodia, where she's been focusing on improving working conditions in the global garment supply chain. Of specific interest for today's topic, she worked closely with CARE and was the Better Work gender expert in the development of the guidelines that we're going to talk about today, which were designed to prevent and address gender-based violence and harassment in global supply chains. So there's no one better to hand over to. Over to you, Jenny. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and hello, good afternoon to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. Thank you to GIZ for organising and for hosting this event and for bringing us together. Today, Tida, Sachita and myself will talk to you about the gender-based violence and harassment guidelines, why we have them, who they are aimed at and what they are. For many years now, brands and factories and manufacturers have been asking about how we deal with this issue. And what's very positive is that the conversation has evolved over the years. It has moved from the question of, is this happening, to what are we going to do about it? And over the past few years working on this, we've seen a huge amount of passion and enthusiasm and goodwill to address this issue. So that's something, that's a very big milestone. It's a complicated, sensitive area for many reasons. We know that the danger of gender-based violence and harassment is very real in any workplace where there is a power imbalance and where there can be a lack of transparency. And garment factories, unfortunately, often fit this bill. In Cambodia, for example, there is a huge amount of young women who are not very educated. They're not always aware of their rights. They might not know how to file a grievance, and if they, even in the case that they do, they might be afraid to do so because of what might happen afterwards. So BFC and CARE were asked by various constituents to come up with one set of guidelines which everyone in the supply chain could refer to, and that's what we've aimed to do and what we'll share with you today. It came from initially an event called the Business of Women at Work event, which took place in 2019. And we came together with supply chain actors in South Asia and Southeast Asia many different groups, brands, workers, manufacturers, to talk about how we can, what is needed in these guidelines and how we can make them happen. And so for the years following that, we worked with constituents and with brands and with CARE to put together what we'll present to you today. So I'll start off by showing you a little bit of a video of this event. I find it quite inspiring, and I hope you do too. So you can see where it starts off, and then my colleagues will go into more of the detail with you, and hoping to hear from the participants today. Thank you very much.
Sexual harassment is prevalent. However, not much has been done. And instead of us deciding what should be done, we wanted a dialogue with the other stakeholders or the industry leaders on how to manage this.
It's very important. It's not just only say, but
Sure.
I've been doing this work for 30 years. So to come to a space like this and to have everyone in the room start from a place of we have a problem is powerful, right, and tremendous.
So this one specifically is about leadership.
I learned different perspectives from different key stakeholders, which is a very rare case to happen. Especially from the big brands, because combating the sexual harassment at workplace, especially in the countries where law enforcement is not very strong, the role of the brands are very important and powerful.
Having the workforce of producing many human commodities used by the rest of the world, of course we are responsible and we must make sure to make our laborers be happy and safe environment.
So if you find out that the company invests in terms of blind eye to an issue like sexual harassment in the supply chain, or even worse, they don't even know where they're sourcing from, it asks the questions to you, well, what else should we worry about? And what kind of company is this?
I think we want to keep building on this as CARE and Better Work and with the industry for that collaboration and collective action, but it's a really good first step.
Now we have to sit down and pick each other's brains on how that's going to look and what will we actually do together.
Collaboration is essential. None of us individually is able to overcome this issue in the workplace, but working collaboratively to address the problem, we will win. We will succeed.
Yes, thank you so much for watching the video. Also, thank you, Jenny. Good morning and afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to be part of the webinar today. Let's start with the quiz. It's not a test, just only warm-up activity. So I will use a Slido for the quiz. And everyone, could you kindly see the screen? Can you see the screen on the Slido screen? Everyone? Yes. Yes, thank you. Everyone, please use your smartphone to scan the QR code that was appear on the screen. And then you will be required to put your name, but no need, you just put your nickname or your initial. And then you will see the question that with the multiple answer, you just select only one answer. After everyone answer the question, we can go to the next question. Do you have any question? It's not, Munko, you can move to the question. Yeah, the question number one, just talking about according to the CARE study on the prevalence and productivity, the harassment to the garment category in the 2017. You said which figure represent the number of women who experience sexual harassment in the workplace? You can select one answer from these four here. Now we got 15 answer among of 18. Maybe we can move to the next question. So this is a connect question according to the BAC assessment data. How many cases of the factory have been found with sexual harassment in the last 7 years? Now we got 16 answer. Hope to get more answer from the demanding participant. Or one more 17. Yeah. 18 right now. 19. Only 2 remain. Oh, it's 20 right now. Yes, thank you. Maybe we could move to the next question. Yeah, oh, most people answer question number 2, B, where the correct answer is D. Yes. Munko, can you move to the next slide? And the question, sorry. What is gender-based violence and harassment? Now we got 20. So the correct answer is F. Oh, 100%. Correct. Yeah, we can move to the final question. Yeah. According to the case study on the prevalence and productivity costs of sexual harassment to the Cambodia garment industry in 2017, what is the estimate annual productivity cost of sexual harassment in the garment industry? Now we got 16. It's keep going. 19. 20. 'The correct answer is 89 million. So most people answer the numbers, the 3 is 32%. Yeah, the correct answer is 89 million. So who is the winner? It's the top score. We have 5 top score. Yeah, congratulations everyone. But it's not a test. We will not get a gift. Thank you for your participation for the quiz. As I mentioned, just only a warm-up activity. We don't want to measure your knowledge or experience. So let's move to the next session. We will be talking about the story. Sorry, Joe, you will have on the slide. Please move. Yes, thank you, Jules. I would like to share with you one story. Let me just put the title that it's better to avoid the situation rather than to the report. BSC with a consultancy company recently reached out and spoke to a group of female garment workers, and the worker report to us that the experience in the factory, the office staff invited female worker to come alone and have a dessert in his office. And his office was far and isolated from the main production area. When female worker was invited, they don't want to go alone. They brought other worker to come along with them. Even they feel uncomfortable, they don't want to report about this. They just use their own means to figure out how to stay safe and avoid the situation where they was alone and avoid with the office staff. And then our research team asked them if anyone have reported him. Can you guess what is the answer from the female group? They just said no, because some of us are afraid of getting fired. So what we can do is to avoid him as much as we can. This is a very short story. So up to you hearing the story, what is your thought? Everyone, can you answer my question? What is your thought after you hearing this story? You can type in the chat box, or you can unmute and speak up. It seems quiet. Maybe it's the sign of the silence. It means everyone understand. Yes, thank you, everyone. This story just tell a little bit about the experience that happened in the factory. That the worker they don't feel protected, and they don't feel safe. When the problem happen, they feel that it's their responsibility to manage the problem, to solve the problem. And also in the reality, because of the power dynamic and hierarchy, that they are often in the very difficult situation like that. It is in fact that it's a responsibility of the factory to create a culture, do the training, or have a system that to ensure that safety and transparency workplace for everyone in the workplace. So everyone, do you have any question or comment, or would you like to share some your experience about this? If no, I will move to the next slide. So let's move to the next slide. So right now you hear about the story, about the background of the guideline, why we have the GBBA guideline. And so the main objective of this guideline is to prevent this type of situation or situation that are more serious. When they happen, to make sure that we take the right step to address and improve it. For this to be true effective, we need everyone in the supply chain to adopt these guidelines, such as brand, employer and industry association, manufacturing group, government, trade union, and other agents. And like the Vito mentioned, the collaboration is very important. If we work together, we can achieve our goal together. Thank you. That is all from my part. Any question from anyone in this group?
Peter, someone wrote into the chat box, I wonder why they don't feel okay to report it. It seems that workers don't trust the process.
Sorry, Stephen, I cannot hear clearly.
Yeah, sorry. Someone wrote into the chat box before, I wonder why workers don't feel okay to report. It seems that workers don't trust the process. Oh, and someone else said avoiding problems increases the frequency of the problem.
Yes, I think what they mentioned is true. It's one part of the reason that why the worker not unreported. Because in our recent gender study report, we found many factors that contribute to this problem. Sometimes they don't want to report because they feel not safe. They fear they lose the job. This is the other reason. Yeah, and then sometimes they said the environment is not supported, like they mentioned, like the system in the factory. It's not encourage people to speak out. Yeah. I think what you mentioned is one reason. Yeah.
Yeah, and someone else says people avoid complaining because it's difficult to prove. It's difficult to really have evidence to prove that this is happening.
I think in our study, we don't have much evidence about that, but also we learn from our experience and we hear from our participants during our sexual harassment training. Yeah, they also mention about this. Sometimes when the victim, they report this, somebody is not listen to them or is not trust them. They said because of themselves or yes, sometimes they blame the victim. Because you know that mostly the victim, they are the vulnerable people, they are literacy, sometimes they don't understand about their right. Yeah, so that is also difficult them to prove them.
Yeah, and then someone else has mentioned, how can you trust the process? If an office is so far away, if the company allows an office to be so far away, that should raise red flags. That should be an indicator that something is wrong.
Yeah, I think it's a red flag sign that we need to if it has happened, we need to get a more investigation. If we hear this case, we not make assumption. I think they mention it's right, but in our culture like Cambodia, if I am a woman and the man invited me to go to somewhere that is quiet and far away from the people, I feel not safe. This is our culture. And I don't want to go alone because they are men, you know.
Someone else has commented that victim blaming is still a big problem that prevents victims from reporting cases. And they do that to avoid even further trauma.
Yes, I think I agree with they mentioned. Sometimes they said if I report this case, we be getting a fired or maybe I will be scared myself. Sometimes I get stressful. I fear that the harasser will be do something badly for me after that. So it's like I victim fear that overwhelming if they report this to the other people. Yeah, it's true. I think I also heard from some people talk about that too.
Peter says there's clearly a huge power imbalance. Workers need to be represented collectively, which reduces the risk and the power imbalance.
I think yeah, like I mentioned already about the power dynamic in the workplace. It reflects to the power imbalance. You know that if the people like harasser is a high position, the victim scared and unreported because they are my boss. I will they will stop or terminate me if I report it. So and also some people they said I'm a boss, I can do whatever. They don't scare me. They don't. So that is also related to powers, I think. And also it's about the power in the society, like the man in Cambodia culture. Men they said I'm like the one idea they said men like the ghost, women like the clothes-wise. Men can do anything, but they still go. But if women affected by suffer from domestic or violence, they are the white clothes. They will be dirty. They cannot steal the white color, you know. This is related to the power in the society that they put the stereotype for the difference between men and women. This also affect to that also. I agree that the collective action is help. If people in the workplace they work together and they understand about that, they set clear system or clear handling mechanism to solve the problem, and they have supportive environment, I think would be helpful to reduce some case of sexual harassment.
We've got some other comments. It's about the trust level of the company's grievance system. Is there an anti-retaliation policy or system in place? Is it possible to engage with a third party given the sensitivity? And then someone's obviously read that comment and said, what kind of grievance mechanisms should be put in place, in your opinion, so workers gain trust in the process and start reporting GBV, gender-based violence? How would you train workers to distinguish between gender-based harassment and other kinds? I know there's a lot there, but these are the kinds of...
Steve, or Steve, do you mind if I step in for a moment? Yeah, these are really great comments from the participants. I think what the guidelines do is, so first of all, they try to promote transparency so that people are not afraid to talk about this issue. And when workers are willing to report it, or when they know that something bad has happened to them, then they can come together and they can, you know, what was your comment, Peter? Yeah, that they organize and address this together. But and the other thing is that it is very hard to put these systems in place unless you have sort of support from the leadership in the factory and the culture of addressing this. And what has happened for a long time is that there's what brands often say is that they have a zero tolerance approach to sexual harassment. And they have this on their websites and in their strategies. And it sounds really good on paper to have a zero tolerance approach to this behavior. But what it actually means is that people hide these issues and factories hide these issues. They don't put them in a grievance if they try and avoid it being in the grievance mechanism system. And one brand in a factory might decide, okay, I respect that this factory has reported on a case of sexual harassment, so I'm gonna stay with the factory, I'm gonna support them. But another brand might say, okay, there's a case of sexual harassment here, I'm worried about my reputation, so I'm gonna pull out from the factory. So what we're trying to do is address that by making everybody responsible. So these guidances, they're not just for factories, but they're for brands and for agents and for all of the different supply chain actors, so that they can talk about it and we can raise awareness about it and work from there. Yeah, but maybe Stefan, do you mind if we move on to the other part of the presentation, because I think that will also address some of the questions that are coming through as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
Peter, back to you.
Yes, thank you, Jenny. Right now, we would like to pass to Jita.
Okay, thank you, Thida. And hello, everyone. I assume that we are all in different time zones, so this could be good morning and good afternoon. So let me take a chance to have a quick introduction, a bit about myself. So I'm Suchita, and Enterprise Advisor and also a gender focal point for BFC. So yeah, I'm here together with my colleague Janice and also Thida. Yeah, I found that there's very interesting discussion and also a lot of opinion and also question in the chat box, and that show about the reason behind to contribute for the traumatization of the victim. So that's why there's not much reported case from the victim related to the GBBH at the workplace. So right now I want to show you to look further into the guideline, how the GBBA guideline that we established, how this guideline can address those issues with the underlying root cause that you all mentioned. Okay, sorry, George, can you move to next slide, please? Okay, so as Tina already introduced you one of the story, and yeah, we all know that the story it's very sad story, but actually it's just one among many other story. It can be the hidden story of the worker that they experience the sexual harassment at the workplace. So we know that the reason why we should because this act like GBBH is very impactful, and it can impact to the individual health, well-being, productivity, and as well as business as a whole. So that is why we need to take action to combat the GBBH at the workplace. So that is why in the guideline, with the request from our constituent, as mentioned by Jenny at the beginning, because we got requests from our constituents and also stakeholder. That is why we came together to create this guideline in order to help the industry to mitigate the risk of GBBH. So in this guideline, we have clear procedures with a strong messages from the leadership, and it should be considered as part of the business obligation to respect human rights and also to promote gender equality. Basically, we adopt some procedure like to comply or in line with the UN guiding principle, like on business and human rights, and also to comply with the Sustainable Development Goal as that we know as the SDG. And we know that there is a quite like complexity with the UN language in the guiding principle. So this guideline have been adopted and made it less complicated and more practical for embedding good practice at the factory level. Next slide, please. So I know that many of you maybe have a lot of questions, like how this guideline gonna address the issue, because we all know the reason behind. We all know this is very sensitive. So I will like take you a look what is inside in the guideline. So the guideline were designed to guide a diverse group of supply chain stakeholders, as Bondida mentioned in her presentation about different stakeholder from supply chain like brand, retailer, licensor, something like that, etc. And the core guidance include like the 5 procedures related to different areas of supply chain, like set up human resource management, procurement, purchasing, and sourcing, and many other L that you can see in the slide. The click, please. Yep, thank you. So its procedures is broken down into the essential area for action, like which cover the 5 aspects of the workplace. And you can see, like Jenny also already explained, like because there's a question about the grievance mechanism and what can be effective to address the issue. So in our guideline, we also address the 5 aspect area that we can use it to like address the issue in the supply chain related to GBBH. So the first, you can see the organizational leadership, like because it's very important, like for the business itself, especially from the top management, whether you have commitment, you make this issue as a priority, because if your factory does not put the issue as a priority and you put like productivity more, it should be something, it cannot be happen like how to address it. The issue is still there. So it's very important to have the leadership commitment. And secondly, to have the workplace policy. It is very important to have the system, to have the effective and supportive policy in place to provide like effective remedy by protecting people who have the least power and are most at risk that suffer from the power dynamic in the workplace. As I can see, there's a lot of comment in the chat box that you mentioned about the power dynamic, and it's very important factor. And we know that as long as the power dynamic is going there, it still exists at the workplace. So the issue of GBBH and sexual harassment is still happening because of the power dynamics. And the third, the workplace system, it's also very important to ensure that the system at your workplace are accessible, easy for workers to reach. Like if you know that your workers are mostly illiterate, but you put the system that you need them to write to report the case, so it can show that it's quite inaccessible for them. So you have to make sure that the system that you set is accessible and also effective, and most of all have to be gender sensitive in preventing the GBBH. And the first one are the workplace norm and practice. You know that there's a lot of cultural norm going around, not only at the workplace, but the whole country, like society as a whole. So it's very important to change people's mindset and to try the culture change at the workplace. So it's very important to analyze the root cause, because if we don't know about the root cause, about the culture, the mindset of the people, so the issue is still there. So we need to know and to change it. And lastly, the workplace planning is very important. We know that the issue is there and what should be done to improve it. So we have to encourage to raise awareness people, to have the early intervention and prevention, and also to address the root cause of the gender inequality and also GBBH in the factory. So it's all the 5 aspects that you need to address. Thank you. Next slide, please. So here is the guidance note. So the guidance is supported. As I mentioned, we have like the core guidance, like include 5 procedure, and then we broken down into the essential area, like the 5 aspects that I mentioned earlier. And then we have the guidance. It is more like the practical guidance that support by the 8 implementation guides, which provide more detail for the business in the supply chain on how to implement the procedure in more sustainable way. But I'm not going to explain detail on this guidance. I will brief only a little bit of what is it about, and at the end of this slide, we will give you the QR code that you can access the full document. So I saw that there's very interesting question that you asked about the grievance mechanism. So in here, we also have guidance note number 2 that talking about the grievance mechanism, what is kind of the practical one. So yeah, we can answer it later, and you also can look it further in the guidance note. So as you can see in the slide, the guidance note 1, workplace policy on the GBV8. So we can see that this guidance note is very practical to support the factory to establish a policy, because it's very important if you want to show the commitment, not only by doing, you also have to prove the written paper, like to have the policy in place to ensure that the system is going on well, and if it's functioning, it's easy for you to evaluate it later. And for the guidance note 2, as I mentioned, about the grievance mechanism, it's very crucial to set up the functioning one at the workplace. And it's also very important to make everyone in the factory or at the workplace aware of how the grievance mechanism works. Sometimes you create or establish the grievance mechanism, but no one know about it. Like, for example, when we go to factory, we ask the worker, do you know how to report the case? And all they answer, they said, no, they don't know. They don't know how to report or where to report. So that is the problem when you have it, but it's not functioning. So the grievance mechanism, it must be set up in a way that's sensitive and also be responsive to the issue. And one most important thing is to protect worker from retaliation. So if you put the grievance, for example, suggestion box in place, and worker put their complaint in there, and then you have some kind of act like to further traumatize the victim, to incentive the victim not to report the case. So it's gonna be, it doesn't work anyway. So it's very important to ensure that it's protect workers and also to have survivors or victims center approach. And for referral, guidance note 3, it is very important to mapping the appropriate referral service in the local area that where the victim or survivor that can refer to. So in the guidance note, we also recommend certain important steps in making referral available as well. And for the guidance note 4, monitoring and reporting system. So we intend to support the supply chain to develop the measure and know what and how to track the progress. So it's very important when you have the policy, when you have the grievance mechanism. So it's very important to monitor the progress, whether it's functioning, whether it works well, effective for the workers. And guidance note 5 is assessment. So it's very important to analyze the risk on the GBV8 and to integrate into the existing risk management framework at the workplace. Guidance note 6, responding to disclosure. We know that GBV8 and sexual harassment are very sensitive topic in nature, and that is why there's not much people report about the case because of the sensitive topic. And we know that not everyone is like professional to work on this. Therefore, we have to ensure like confidentialities and the do no harm principle to the victim or the survivor of GBV8. And also the guidance note 7, working training. It like to have the factory or the workplace, the supplier to identify the suitable high quality training to provide the workforce to address the issue as well. And lastly, it's very important. I think Jenny already stressed out the very important message about zero tolerance, because we know that most of the buyer always put the issue of GBV8 and sexual harassment as their zero tolerance protocol or issue. That is why we can see, look at another angle of the issue. It's quite unrealistic to put the zero tolerance on the GBV8 because sometimes it prevents the victim like not to report the case, and also it sometimes also made the factory or the management team try to hide the case even more because they are afraid of the zero tolerance, they're afraid of the order have been removed from the buyer. So that is why we encourage the brand and buyer and other stakeholders to be more like support the factory when they found the case, to take a proper solution and also to solve the case effectively to ensure victim and survivor center approach. Yeah. I hope, do you have any question for this slide? If not, I will move and you can ask the question at the end of the slide because of the time. Yeah. Okay, next slide, please. So we may have like got a question, how can we use this guideline? So there are a number of ways that we can use this guideline. First of all, to translate the UN language into the simple way, because this guideline we try to adapt from the UN guiding principle. So you know that UN language is quite complex sometimes. So for this guideline, we try to make it simple that can apply in the industry and for business. And we have the very practical step-by-step procedure that you can follow and you can apply it. And the second one also to review and benchmark the existing policy system, like whether the factory, your factory doing enough to combating the GBV8 or sexual harassment, whether it's still happening. It's very important to track the progress. And also to identify gaps and improvement area for action planning, and to embed like key principle into the corporate policy, procedure, etc. And also very important to communicate internally among the business and also externally to the business partner and other stakeholders. And lastly, this guideline is to guide by practical action for continuous improvement as well. So overall, the guideline designed to be like implemented by all the business in the upper supply chain to like effectively prevent and respond to the GBV8. So yeah, thank you. That's all from my part. So if you have any question, feel free to ask, like to unmute yourself, or you can drop the question in the chat box. Thank you. I give the floor back. Yeah.
Cheetah, I'll just Andy has a question about, are there any unintended consequences of introducing the concept of sexual harassment to the workplace? Do factory owners have any concerns about talking about sexual harassment and these issues with the workforce? Well, Cheetah, your camera has gone off. Cheetah? I think we may have lost Cheetah, Jenny. No?
I think you're on mute, Cheetah. We can't hear.
Okay, can you hear me right now? Sorry.
Yes.
My
yes.
internet, yeah, it just froze. Hello, Andy, are you here? Can you like unmute yourself and ask the question, the whole question, please? I also want to hear the participant like interact, like not only from us. Yeah.
I don't know if Andy can unmute himself. I don't think the George, can Andy unmute himself?
All right, it comes to, yes, now. Thank you very much. And just wondering about any of your experience and or observations of any unintended consequences of introducing the concept of sexual harassment to the workers, or would the factory owners have any concerns of external consultants or even themselves talking about sex issues with the workers? Thank you.
So from your question, you want to hear from us about the reason that you like the consequence, any consequence that the factory owner talking about sex with the workers. So yeah, it's very important to know that like sexual harassment and the GBVH is a very sensitive topic. So, and in any training or any disseminate meeting about the issue, we have to be like careful, in order, because sometimes when you provide the training or provide you think something covert related to sexual harassment, it might be do more harm to the victim. Like for example, like HIV/AIDS training to the worker, and they talk about sexual reproductive health, but they did not check how the worker feel about it. So sometimes make the worker like feel so scared of it, and they're afraid, they don't want to join it because you know that some cultural barrier, like in Cambodia context, we not normally talk about it like publicly. So it's very important for the factory. We had a lot of this issue like from the factory side about how they have the problem. But from our experience, like we working with CARE, like to have the project's implementation on the combating the sexual harassment at the factory level. So we normally when we invite all the management team, like especially the HR, that the one that continue disseminate about the issue to the worker, we always like rest about the very important, like to have to be sensitive. Like when you say something, anything, you have to be sensitive, and you have to know about the some cultural barrier of the worker, like using have to be like refrain using some word that can affect to the worker, because we want to encourage the worker to join the training and to want to raise their awareness about the issue. But it's also very important to know about their context and use the word that can be appropriate and can be acceptable for them to understand. I'm not sure if I respond to your question. But surely, yeah, like not many people like are professional, or not many people like know how to use the correct way, because sometimes it's quite, quite tricky, because it's more, if you don't use the right word, if you are not very sensitive, gender sensitive enough, it might be lead to further traumatization to the victim. So we have to be careful in that. Yeah.
Thanks, Andy, and thanks, Cheetah. There is another question here, but it's about root causes, and that seems quite complex. And I think we'll come back to that towards the end, maybe, or maybe that gets covered as we go along. But maybe we should proceed to the next section now. All right. So what's the next section now, Cheetah?
Sorry. Okay. So let's move to the next question. The next section that we gonna have some question. I know that all of you gonna like want to interact more than this and want to like express your ideas and also to show your question. So we will move to the next section that we have the jump board. For all of you to we have 3 questions actually. And you can answer the question to our question, but you also can post any question that you want to us to respond to you. So yeah, George, please show the question. Thank you. Okay, so right now we have 3 questions for you. What the first question is, what are your immediate thought on and reaction to this guideline? I know that you have a lot of immediate thought. We can see a lot of question and comment in the chat box. And second, we have the question about how do these guidelines fit with your current approach to GmbH? And lastly, what are some challenges in implement this guideline? So because this guideline is just newly established, like we just published it publicly in 2021. So it's quite new. So just from your own opinion, what do you think about can be like challenges for your factory or for your supply chain to implement the guideline? So we will post the Jamboard if we have time, right, George? So we will post the Jamboard link. Yeah, Jamboard link, so everyone can click to the Jamboard and you can post the sticker to answer the question, or you can post any comment of the question back.
Okay, there's the link is in the chat box to the Jamboard. And you can click on that link. It will take you to a Jamboard where you can make comments on those 3 questions, or indeed pose your own questions or comments. So just click on that link in the chat box that GIZ Fabric has just put in the chat box. And when you get to that link, you will see those 3 questions. Then you can just put your answers to those questions, put your thoughts, comments. So we're starting to get some already. Very good, thank you. So at the top of the Jamboard, you can see there's a left and right. You can move the sheets left or right. 1 of 3, 2 of 3, 3 of 3. Oh. So some people might not have oh, I see. People in China may not have access or will not have access to Google Tools. Is there a yeah, so Andy's put a question in the chat box for Cheetah and Fida and Jenny. So anyone dialing in from China will have to just use the chat box and put their questions in. Okay, we've got some. All right, so let's, on the first question, what are your immediate thoughts on and reactions to these guidelines? Someone has posted, I'm wondering what needs to happen so that the guidelines and frameworks are scaling up more. So this is the question of scaling. So how do we make this, how do we make it so that the guideline is able to be scaled up to many, many factories? What needs to happen for that to occur? Who wants to answer that? Cheetah, are you answering all questions, or can Jenny or Thea also
divide and conquer?
Yeah, right. Okay. So what about scaling up? You know, how does this how do you expand this? What needs to happen?
So we don't manage factories or brands or agents. What BFC have done in Cambodia is we've trained unions. with a TOT model so that they can deliver it to workers. And we've trained labor inspectors and we've trained employers. So, but you know, we put these together. We kind of saw ourselves as the experts in putting this together, and we've done a number over the past 2 years, just tried to share these as widely as possible. And it will take really, I think, brands and manufacturers actually taking the guidelines and putting them into practice themselves and applying them. And then, you know, getting back to us if it doesn't work perfectly, or if there are changes that need to be made. But I think our role in it, in a way, is we'll continue to promote them and do trainings on them, but it needs to be taken over by the supply chain actors who've asked for this and kind of, you know, applied to their workplaces.
So a follow-up to that is, what support resources will be needed to make it happen? Are there any specific things that you know, brands, factories, agents, you know, whoever's involved in this mix, support and resources?
I mean, I guess we have the guidelines. They're very detailed. We have an implementation guide for them. What we recommend in some of the guidelines is, you know, in your own country, for example, that you figure out which referral systems work, and you figure out which, you know, organizations can do the type of training that you want to do. So it kind of, in a way, puts the responsibility of making it work in your country and kind of doing the quality assurance based on the guidelines. I'm just looking at Lou's comments. I think the guidelines are great and seem to align to ILO Convention 190. They're quite detailed. Yeah, so training and support and follow-up will be important to ensure they're implemented, definitely. Yeah, fully agree. There's a lot of guidance and guidelines out there on various topics, and it's the easy part in a way, and then the next part is to making sure that they're properly implemented.
Sorry, Stefan. I think it would be great if George show us the Jamboard so we can all see what has like posting there.
Yeah, there's a lot on it now. George, can you share that? Is that possible? Anyway, while he's seeing if we can do that, how many factories are implementing these guidelines, and what's been the impact so far? Here we go. So I'm looking at this one here.
So I can talk from the Cambodia perspective. We've done extensive training in about 15 factories ourselves. But I don't have a figure for how many factories have started to implement it yet, and what the impact is. A way to measure the impact would be when we've done that type of training and intervention in factories. Part of how we've measured it is by looking at how their grievance mechanisms are playing out, and if workers are reporting issues of sexual harassment.
Yeah.
Yep.
In the middle, I've got three here in a column that all involve really questions about unions, the role of unions, getting workers involved, consultation with workers and collaborations with unions. Can you speak to that? You know, collaborating with workers and the role of the union or unions.
Okay, so yeah, union is very important role to have the addressing the issue, and also to cooperate with the factory to be ensured that they have a system in place to combating the issue. because everyone is like, it's very relevant to address the issue. And as you mentioned about the trade union, we also, because right now BSC, we also developing the manual guide, like the training manual for the trade union specifically, because as Jenny mentioned, we have the training to the factory about this guideline that we have planned. And we also develop the manual, the training manual for the factory, for the enterprise. And we also have the manual training for the trade union separately, because we know that they are very like important, like important role as well to address the issue. So yeah, you raised a very good point about the union in dealing with the issue. Because
Yes,
we know that, sorry.
So just make sure I'm clear on this. So the guidelines do specifically talk about consultations and collaborations with workers and unions. There's actual guidance on that. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think Lou has summed it up perfectly, is that it's important to engage unions so they understand the guidelines and can refer to them and leverage these in conversations with employers about addressing GBVH.
Yeah, okay. Someone's put a comment here. It's not so much a question, but a lot of detailed content for users to understand. So important to communicate and support implementation with trainings and other sort of follow-up and support. This kind of goes back to the question that we started off with, which was what support is needed. But is there a program or framework in place to for trainings and communications and support? Is there a kind of a step 1, 2, 3 involved with this?
Actually, in the guideline, we have like a clear procedure, like as I present about the guidance also have the action tall area, like the 5 aspects to apply, and in the guideline itself also have the example of how to implement, to broken down into the aspect area that we can easily to understand and to evaluate later whether the system that's setting in place it reflect to the issue and can respond well to the issue. And yes, as mentioned, like there's a lot of like activity that need to take action, like especially from the supply chain, to have like to get the support from outside, like from the third party, and to have the training in place, to have the follow up, to reflection and the end. So there's a lot of procedure for you to follow in the guidance.
Yeah. So just this is just for participants, for people attending. You can see at the top there's the ability to move from one slide to another. So there's the 2 other questions. Whoops. We've got some time lag here, right? But there's 2 other questions, and right. So you can see here now there's a second question, and then there's a third question as well. So if you've got comments on those other 2 questions, please paste a question there. All right, I've gone back to the first page. There's some time lag between. Yeah, okay. Back to the first page. What about engagement with legislation, with authorities, regulatory bodies, governments, to drive institutional and cultural change? This is a much bigger question, I think, but it's an important one. Talk about unions and workers, but what about governments and the law? Where do the guidelines fit in with that?
We're working with labour inspectors at that level to help them when they're doing inspections or assessments in factories, so that they also take these guidelines into consideration and are better at finding cases of gender-based violence and harassment. Better Factories Cambodia doesn't engage really directly with the government on legislation change, but our data informs other parts of the ILO which work on these areas, and we do a lot of capacity building of constituents in areas where they need to improve. Yeah, that's a big question.
Yes, it is indeed. Yeah. I'm looking at the second question now. How do these guidelines fit with your current approach to GBVH? And someone's posted one sticky there, and they've written. So the question: how do these guidelines fit with your current approach? So this is a question aimed at factories. So one response has been considering doing supplier training rather than simply reporting GBV as zero tolerance issue. I presume this comes from a brand. As a comment, I guess not a question, but do you have any commentary on that you'd like to add?
Sachita, I think this is a great comment, exactly what we would like to see happening. And if we see more of that and less of the reporting on the GBV as a zero tolerance issue, we are helping to support a more transparent, more transparency on this area. That's a great comment, whoever made it.
Yep.
Yeah, and someone else has put another comment to that question too, saying that they will introduce these guidelines to the supply chain, make suppliers aware of the guidelines, and closing gaps with their existing system and or mechanisms. So a similar kind of comment. This is from a brand, I presume, that's thinking of introducing this sort of thing.
It's also very great comment, because because this guideline is it's main focus on the supply chain. So the supply chain itself is very main factor, because if you don't have the commitment itself to address the issue, so the issue is still there. So it's very important to have the commitment from the supply chains to aware about this guideline, and also closing the gap, as you mentioned, is very important. So that is why I think we also want to hear from your side, what can you do, because you asked about how to scale up the guideline and how to make it impactful. So we also want to hear from your side, because you are more in the ground, more gonna be use this guideline. So we also want to hear from your side as well, what can be done.
For the third question, what could be the challenges in implementing the guidelines? Someone said, how do you keep track with actions? Any answer to that? And someone's also just posted, how could we evaluate effectiveness? These two things seem to be quite related.
Okay, so that's good. How to keep track with the actions. So I'm not exactly sure, but on how to evaluate the effectiveness, we have a guidance note on monitoring and reporting systems. And this gives very clear guidance on how to measure the effectiveness and of the policies and the systems that have been put in place, like employee surveys, group discussions, summarizing data on complaints, maybe considering working with an external stakeholder, such as an NGO or that are kind of expert on this issue to support the monitoring and reporting process. Yeah. But there are guidelines on this as well, because I think that's a very important part of what we're trying to do here.
Right. Okay, thanks. I want to turn back to a question that was in the chat box from Andy. Andy's in China and can't use this tool. And he asked, are there clear and simple tools, posters, games, these sorts of things in the guidelines which factory management could use with workers? Are there examples of that?
Yeah, I think in the guideline it says it's already clear, like set up the clear procedure, like step by step, the practical one that for the buyer, for the brand, like all the relevant stakeholders like around the supply chain to know like the practical step to address the issue. So I think in the guideline itself, it's already have a clear procedure on that, like how you report the issue, how you track and value add. Yeah.
And also the guideline also mentioned about the training. So in the training, they mention very clear step on the training development. So if you want to scale up this guideline, you need to produce some material, or you can communicate with other partner or stakeholder that have existing material, like poster, like CARE, they have used a lot of poster, or other organization, they have other tool you can communicate and to ask them to for the implementation. And BAC currently we also develop some material, but it's not still it is still in the process. We not finalize it, but when we finalize it, we hope we can share with our factory.
One last thing here. Andy has also followed up with this in the chat box. How do buyers, how do the brands or the factories go about reporting or telling their stories on how they have prevented or reduced the amount of GBVH? Is there anything in the guidance about how you go about telling your story? I think this is quite a difficult, in my mind, it's quite a difficult question to answer. I'm interested to hear what you say on this.
I think that if we had more brands who were willing to be brave on this and to talk about their approach to transparency, that they will work with factories, that they will be their partner on addressing this issue, that would be really a great story for brands to tell. And the problem is that if this is working, if it works well, what we're trying to do, there will probably be an increase in the number of harassment cases that are increased. So I don't really, and that's a hard one to report. So I don't know. I think you can tell about your values around this and your method, but in terms of the impact and how you report on it, I think that's a really tough one. I don't have the answer for you, Andy, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's yeah. Selena says, according to guidelines, factories are moving forward or not, who will monitor this system? At the moment, if workers need support, how can they receive it in a factory where it is not practiced properly? Yeah, if anyone wants, but I think we need to start wrapping up soon. Do you want to tackle that last question? Who monitoring it? The whole question of monitoring it and what's happening in factories where this is not in place?
No, Tita, I think you can answer the last part of that question very well. And what's happening to workers when they don't have the system in place? It relates a little bit to the story that you told earlier on, maybe.
Yes, it's sure. Yeah, I think it's the factory that have a clear system in place that already mentioned in the story that people did not trust the system, so they do not want to report it. Yes, and also create the environment that is not supportive people to speak out. So I think it's very important that we're thinking about the system in place, strong system, and where communicate with the worker as well as trade union and like worker representative. So they are the key player to speak out the message or the key intervention to the worker to make them to understand about how they can report it. And mentioned worker is support how they receive the factory, but it's not that good. Yes, I think the very important that we learn from our experience is the top management. If the top management of the factory did not show their commitment to solve the problem, so even we have the system in place, but the system is not work. So it's also difficult for worker to report the case. I think the key player is the top management that we need to work with them very closely. And also like Jenny mentioned, also one is the root cause that is from the zero tolerance for instead support from buyer and brand also, because some factories share some experience that if they report the case, is we lose their reputation, so they don't want to report it, they hide it. I think this also contribute to that.
Yeah, thanks, Tita. We need to start wrapping up now. Just before I sort of hand back to Jenny and Theta and Chita, in the chat box, the tech guys have put a little link there to our survey poll, as I mentioned earlier. If you've got, this enables you to let us know how we do in these online seminars. If you've got topics that you'd like us to cover in future technical webinars that are a deeper dive, please click on the link. We really appreciate that, and it helps us a lot. So I'm handing back to the three speakers just for some concluding remarks. Maybe think about some of the questions that have been asked, you know, where we're heading, and what you'd like to see. Maybe we start with Theta. Theta, do you have any concluding comments? Or Chita?
Actually, I saw one comment that posted on the Jamboard, and it's really interesting as well. She's mentioned that scale up or reference, how to scale up the guideline by reference the guideline in the sector by, like she mentioned about collective bargaining agreement. And I think it's really important comment that mentioned about this, because from our previous experience that we used to provide the training to the trade union at the federation level, we also try to like encourage them and also try to convince them to use the guideline about the GBV8 and how the grievance mechanism in place should be put in the topic to discuss with the management in the factory to put in the collective bargaining agreement. So I think it's very important that that is also what we want to do, and also it's our next step to try to convince the trade union to think the GBV8 is very important issue that they should take it, like put it on the table to discuss with the management team.
Yeah, thanks for picking that up. I didn't see that CBA comment there, but I think that's really important. So thank you for that. Theda, do you have any final comments?
Yeah, I think so interesting about the question and comment from our participant, especially when we scale up, we should thinking about our IEC material like poster or like poster game or anything that our partner can use it in the future when they want to apply in their real situation. And also I'm interesting about the one comment about how we work with buyer, about the zero tolerance, how we engage them to understand the situation that happened in the factory to support to prevent sexual harassment or violence. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, thanks, Theda. I'm just looking at the long comment in the chat box from Peter from Homeworkers Worldwide. looking at other sectors as well, Malawi in tea and sugar plantations. Yeah, this is it's not just the apparel, the textile supply chain. Jenny, back to you. Look, any final comments? I think this has been a great session. I think there's been a lot of interaction. What are your last remarks?
Thanks, Stefan. And just on Peter's comments, he said that happened in the tea, women tea pluckers, and it's not just, but we hear about it in organizations and all of these cases with UN organizations and with NGOs. So it's not just the garment sector. It is it's an issue in many types of workplaces. Yeah, so I just want to say thanks so much to everybody for joining. It's really heartening that there's so much interest in this, and thanks for all of the questions. They've made us really think, and they've made me think anyway, about how we can continue to kind of push these guidelines out there and work more with people. And my ask is just to share the guidelines, to not replicate the work, but to build on these, to do more on them. So yeah, thanks very much, Stefan, and everybody.
Thank you, Jenny. That last point is so important. You know, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We've got a very extensive, you know, as we saw in the presentation, we've got a very extensive set of documents there that any company, organization can put into practice. So that just remains for me to thank everybody who attended, but thank you very much to our three speakers, without whom we wouldn't have got through this at all. Everyone, stay safe and stay well, and thank you for attending, and goodbye from all of us at GIZ Fabric Asia. Thank you.